What is a firewall? I hope they use the name like my brain thinks, because my brain thinks, ooh, it's a way to create a wall of protection. Nice and clean and simple. What do I need more than one? Wait, what? Why do I need more than one firewall? You can have multiple firewalls? Like, I didn't know this. I'm excited to hear. Apparently, you can have more than one firewall. Which device already has a firewall enabled? Like, this made my day. Like, whatever device that is, I love when a device has built-in protection. Thank you. What kind of devices have an increased need for firewalls? So my immediate guess was phones, and then I was like, no, wait, I want to change my answer to laptops. And I only changed that because I thought, we connect to a lot of, like, with me and my laptop, I connect to multiple different Wi-Fi networks, not just my own within the home, but other networks. And so I was like, I wonder if it's laptops. So I'm excited to see what devices have an increased need for them. I could be dead wrong on this one. So that said, our listeners know by now I'm not the techie. So that's what we turn to you, our master guardian, for. And as always, welcome back and thanks for tuning in. I'm Nick, and this is Super Simple Security Principles. Listen each week and learn how to think, not what to think. This is episode 57. Wow. We're getting up there, man. 57. Yeah. This phrase that you got right here, or that you wrote, I was super pumped with, because how firewalls protect you and what you might be missing. We've talked about this on last week's episode. Like, to me, this is an important one. We're protecting from within, and this is the most universal, and most fundamental protection you can get. So, dude, like, now's the time to turn on that brain real quick. Harness in. We're going to go, because this is what we need. This is what we need. We're getting down to the nitty gritty, man. I love it.
Yeah. Well, and we'll hopefully keep it super simple, right?
If not, you know that I won't understand. So, I mean, it's that simple.
You'll complain. That's right.
I'll be like, what?
Yeah. Well, and in the world of computer firewalls, like the actual tech behind them, I mean, they're pretty complex behind the scenes. And there's a lot of different kinds, and especially when you talk about like the corporate environment and things. But for our purposes, we're going to ignore pretty much all of that. We're just going to focus on one tiny little thing.
Okay.
And that's essentially like a super simplified version of a few different ways that firewalls can protect your home network.
Awesome. I love when we get to ignore all the fluff and all that's going on around us, and we can focus in on one little tiny detail. Like, for me, I'm like, okay, I can do that. I can focus in on that one area. So let's have it, man.
Yeah. And it's a big topic. Well, and so, I was interested when so one of the questions, right, that we started with is, what is a firewall?
Yeah.
Now, depending on our listeners, and what their background is, then, they might answer this quite differently than I do, right? Because the way I grew up, my first association with the word firewall was a computer firewall. But long before computers had firewalls, if you look at the history, and if you're, like I said, depending on what profession you are, you might think of it more as a firewall in a building, because that's where it first came about. Right?
That's where my brain went.
I was saying, right, you know what a firewall is in a building, I assume then.
Yep, I do. I
right? So
do.
why don't you
I
describe,
don't
since you
understand
actually
how
know?
they work. I,
Okay,
I know that there is, well, and even fireproof doors. They got fireproof doors now. Not fireproof, but like doors that can act as a
right,
firewall.
as a barrier. Yeah. Well, and I'm not remotely an expert either, right? Like I read online, I've
Right.
seen them in person, but the way I understand it and is that one of the main purposes of a firewall is to subdivide a building into smaller sections. So if there's a
Mm-hmm.
fire in one section, it can kind of, fall apart and break away from the rest of the building so that fire doesn't spread farther, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yep.
That's how I understand anyway. Okay.
Yeah.
So computer firewalls act, in a similar way. There's no, falling off and breaking away, but the similarity is that it acts as a barrier between networks to
Okay.
keep, in a computer world, the analog of fire is malware, right? We want to stop the
Right.
bad stuff from spreading, right?
Yep.
So a firewall can not only protect, if one network gets infected with malware, it can protect it from another network, but also, um, even within a network, from individual devices, right? Which is part of the reason why we bring this up, because like we were talking about last episode, it's spreading in between devices. And so we need new protection, and a firewall is one of those protections. You can have a firewall on an individual device to protect it.
Very cool. Okay, so that is why I need more than one, because we talked about the IoT in last week's episode, or the Internet of Things, and we have, if we did our call to action, we have ton a ton of stuff that's connected to the internet. Like, dang.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, I'm getting it. Okay, this is, here we
Yeah.
go. This
Now
wasn't
those
too,
those Internet of Thing devices, unfortunately, don't have firewalls. Nope. They're in most cases not sophisticated enough. But that's not the end of the story. Um,
okay.
yeah, we'll get to that. We'll we'll
Okay.
we'll get to that. It's going to be a fine line to try to figure out where to cover here and in the future. So, but so the multiple firewalls thing is right. It's not an individual device that has multiple firewalls, but one thing that I didn't name in episodes 52 and 53, we talked a lot about the router, right?
Yeah.
And without knowing it, we were talking a lot about the firewall in the router. We never used
Okay.
the word firewall in those episodes, right? What we
Right.
talked about, and I know you probably don't remember like the number, obviously in my notes I did, right? That was the episode where we were talking about the simple rule for your router of, and I know you know this, don't answer the phone,
Right. Don't
right?
answer those incoming calls.
Yep. And
Okay.
so your router has a lot of parts, and
Yeah.
a firewall is one of them. And
Okay, nice.
the firewall is specifically the part that's responsible for enforcing that rule.
Okay.
Okay. So we never named it, but that's where, like, and that's what, every home, they've got a router, they're going to have a firewall on that router. So
Nice.
that's the first firewall that everybody has and is everybody's using essentially.
Does that answer our question? Which device already has a firewall enabled? Is that a
Yeah.
router?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's a router. Yep. And so
Okay.
that's our first good protection. It's to protect the fire, the malware from coming from the internet to your home network,
Okay. Okay.
right? So,
Right.
but then the question, of course, comes up: what if it manages to spread through anyway, or if we install malware, like we talked about, these other ways, like what if there is already a fire in the home from, so to speak, malware on some device that's in your home network, however it got there, right? There's various
Right.
ways, like we talked about, what if it's in there? And that's where the firewalls on individual devices come in, because they serve the same purpose as the router on the firewall. That is to
keep it from spreading.
Exactly. Yep. And the only one it protects is itself, right? The router's protecting all the devices, so spreading it from there. Individual devices, all they can do is protect themselves.
Okay. This is making
right?
sense. Okay, yeah.
But that's another layer of protection. So if they bypass the first one, you have a second one, and that's, yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
But like we said, not all devices have firewalls. The main ones that do are going to be your laptops and desktops.
Okay.
Not
phones?
You can. Well, so phones. Here's what I'll say about phones. They don't have firewalls exactly. There's nothing like when we talk about, if you go look and you search online, does iOS, does Android, do they have firewalls? You're not going to see, yes, we have this firewall, right? And it's because when phones were designed, it's fundamentally like they already learned a lot of lessons about security. They designed it in a lot of ways very differently. And phones aren't designed for all the same things. Like when I'm as a software developer, I'm not going to take my phone out to write code and to build apps, right? And so one of the differences, a phone is designed for a very different set of things than a laptop or a computer is in terms of all the things that it can do. And so a phone is much less capable in some ways and much more restricted just from its very core operating system from day one when they built like the first iPhone and the first Android. They were built with a lot more different protections and restrictions that we won't get into. And they're not exactly what I'd call a firewall, but they provide, let's say, comparable protections in a lot of ways. So I would not say they're more vulnerable than a laptop or desktop. In fact, in general, if I was going to pick which category of devices is more vulnerable, I would absolutely pick laptops and desktops over phones.
Okay. That's surprising.
In broad strokes, that's
right.
Yeah. So, does that answer your question about phone?
It does. Yeah.
Okay. So for your laptops and your desktops, I do recommend that you turn on the firewalls. And I'll put links in the show notes in order to do that.
Nice. Yes.
And then, one other question I wanted to address under this is, I know, at least as I was thinking about it, one question I thought might come up for people is, shouldn't my home network be a safe place?
Right. Yeah.
Why do I need firewalls on my individual devices? Right.
Yeah.
And our metaphor actually, or the real world or the physical world firewalls kind of give a reason for that, right? And it's the same kind of idea, what we've been talking about. It's another layer, right? It does mean something bad has already happened, right?
Yeah.
Because our home network is going to be a safer place than anywhere else.
Right.
Absolutely. No argument there.
Yeah.
But security isn't about some illusion of perfect safety. Your home network is not perfect safety. It's just safer.
Right.
So it's about layered protection.
Yeah.
Because even though you have a router with a firewall protecting all the devices on your home network, what if a hacker managed to get past your router's protection, all these other ways, you actually install malware on one of your devices, these things, and that's where the individual device firewalls come in.
Right. Well, this just makes sense. I mean, in life, we have multiple layers of security, right? We've got like police force. We have our Ring doorbells. We have our locks on our doors. We've got all these layers that we add of protection. So essentially, we're doing the same thing in the security world, in the IT world.
Yeah. No, that's good. I like that comparison too. Okay. I wasn't sure how much I was going to have to, try to kind of sell people on this idea of needing, firewalls on their individual devices. So good to
Seems
hear
to
your
make
thoughts
sense
on
for
that.
me. Yeah.
Yeah. So
So
let's
can I
answer.
derail us for like 2 seconds?
Absolutely. Love it when you do.
Okay. Yes. All right. So years ago, this has been years,
Yeah.
long time. Like when I start telling you what I was doing, you can laugh at me and you can be like, duh.
Sweet.
I had a desktop that for me, I wanted a ton of music on, ton of music. I was in college, wanted to listen to a ton. So I went out and I unfortunately ripped it off. There was some websites and some places I could go that I
Oh,
could.
does BitTorrent sound at all familiar?
Oh, absolutely it does.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. You
Yeah.
nailed it.
Yeah.
And I downloaded a ton of music. What I didn't realize is that in so doing, I had just invited the computer person I took my computer to said I had multiple Trojan horses put on my computer. I don't know what that means exactly, but I know I had to pay to get my computer completely wiped and get things reinstalled. And I never ever used that BitTorrent again, ever.
It's
Um,
good.
right. Learned my lesson. Um, that said, would a firewall have helped me circumvent that pain, or at least slowed that down? Because I had no clue. It wasn't until my computer was like working like crap. And I was like, what is wrong with this? Like, it was a brand new
Yeah.
computer, and I'm like, it wasn't working well. Like, it was slow. Like, yeah,
Yeah. So really good question. Funny story. And so here's what I'll say. There is, um, we've talked mostly about firewalls in terms of, let's call it inbound protection, right?
yeah,
Not
yeah.
answering phone
Those
calls,
incoming
right?
calls. Right, right.
However, there's another very powerful category of firewalls that we will be talking about. I actually have a whole episode planned for outbound, what I call outbound firewalls.
Ah,
And they are far less common. Some of it, some that is built into some degree, and some, like in Windows, has some, um, but it's mostly turned off by default and whatever. But it's something that I employ heavily myself. And there are some
okay.
good options, and we will talk about those software. But here's what it would do in the case that you're talking about. It wouldn't have stopped the Trojan from coming in. Basically, nothing would have stopped that, essentially, because you were just doing something. You were basically, download. You were clicking on a bad link, more or less, right? Like you were
Yep.
voluntarily bringing something, that bad malware onto your computer. So that, yeah, that's just. But from there, what would have helped is if you had an outbound firewall. What malware is always going to do is it's going to communicate to what's called the command and control center, I think. Anyway, it's mothership, we'll call it,
Right.
right?
Okay. Yep.
Where it's going to steal your data, send it back to, get updates, do whatever it is. It's going to connect to the internet just like everything else does, right?
Right.
And
Yep.
so if you have an outbound firewall, then what can happen is it'll monitor, and you tell it what outbound connections are allowed, what apps are allowed to connect to the
Ah.
internet.
Okay.
Does that
Cool.
make sense? And so,
Yeah.
you use your web browser, you use other things, you say, okay, yeah, they can connect to the internet, they can connect, and then all of a sudden this new app pops up and it wants to connect to the internet, and you're like, I don't know what that is. I don't want it doing anything,
Right.
and you say, nope.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. Okay.
So that would at
I'm
least
excited for
limit the
those
damage
future
it would do.
episodes.
Yeah, it would limit it a lot. And
Okay.
because, too, one of the things that they do uh, it's very common. I mean, I don't know. I shouldn't say very common. I don't know the numbers exactly, but I have definitely helped people in your exact situation where they're like, my computer's super slow all of a sudden. They're like, why?
Yeah.
What's going on? And I look, and yep, they have malware on there, right? And
Yeah.
so, and the malware does all sorts of different things, but it likes to use all your internet bandwidth it can, you know?
Yeah.
So think of like, if every person on your, in your household's trying to, stream, you know, 4K video all the time or whatever, they're going to, you could have a lot of slowdowns both from the internet level, but also using processing power on your device.
Okay.
To like do cryptocurrency mining or whatever else. I
Mm.
mean, they're going to take advantage of all the resources on your computer that they can, that they're built to anyway. Depends on the specific malware, what they can do. But it happens. And so, yeah, and actually we have there another episode we're going to talk about specifically about that, about this kind of slowdown thing and what they're doing. But here's what I'll say today about that is essentially if you get this kind of malware, a lot of times your computer will basically become a slave for the hackers to do whatever they want with. You're kind of a slave in their slave factory, their mine, your computer, but you don't know it, right? Like
Right.
unknowingly, your device is a slave to just do whatever they want.
That sucks.
Yeah. So, yeah, great question.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we have one more question to answer,
We do. Yep.
and you were exactly right. It is your laptop.
Yes. I knew it. Knew
Now,
it.
did you? I can't remember. Did you give your reasons why you thought that one? I can't remember.
I did. I actually, my thought is because with my laptop, I can connect to so many different Wi-Fi networks. And that
Oh
was
yeah,
my question.
right. Because yeah, right. You take it away from your home network, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And that's right. That's pretty obviously your desktops you don't haul around elsewhere normally.
Right.
Um, yep, that is exactly why. And so, um, we've talked before about the value of a VPN on public Wi-Fi on all these other networks, right? Well,
Right.
even more important than a VPN is a firewall.
Okay. Okay.
So, because that rule we talked about with a router of don't answer the phone, that should apply to any device that you take on any network outside of your home.
Right.
Does
Right.
that make
That's
sense?
kind of what I assumed. Oh yeah, that's why I changed my answer. I initially was like phone. And I was like, no,
Yep.
it's got to be your laptop. So,
Yeah. Well, and your phones sort of do that a lot more by default than your laptop does, basically. And
that's
that's
kind
why
of
I
what I
put
guessed.
yeah. Yep. They're just yeah, I'm kind of jealous of phone security design in some ways because they are just safer in a lot of ways. But um anyway. Uh so yeah, I guess the way I would like to emphasize that is when you connect to any network, and especially like a public Wi-Fi compared to like, say you go to your friend's house or whatever, that's not quite as risky, but especially public Wi-Fi, consider your device to be in a war zone under constant threat of attack. That's the perspective for any device that leaves your home.
Okay.
So that's why, and the firewall, a firewall and VPN, those two. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
provide like just really, really good protection. Uh,
Okay.
so such that
So
I don't
VPN.
hesitate to use public Wi-Fi.
Okay. Okay. So how hard is it to look? I don't know how to set up a firewall on my laptop. I take it out
Right.
all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so the good news uh, these days, both Mac and Windows, which are, the target ones for our listeners, Linux is, if they're using Linux, that they can figure them out themselves probably. But um, they have them built in. And it's just a
Oh,
matter of
good.
basically going to the settings for your operating system and making sure it's all enabled. That's,
And
and
I'm
they don't,
assuming we're gonna put some links in our show notes so they can Okay,
Yeah,
so if you're
exactly.
like me,
It's not too hard.
if you're like me and you're going, crap, I don't know how to do this, we're going to totally hook you up. We're going to put links in our show notes that will help you set this all up.
Yep.
Okay, so don't worry.
Yep.
All
And
I have
that,
to
and
do is
sorry, go
go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say all you have to do is click on our show notes then and
Yep.
figure it out. This is something that I personally am going to do because I take my laptop with me when I travel and when I
Right.
go places.
Yeah.
And this is something I want set up. Like,
Yeah. Well, and
especially if
especially
it's
for
that
you,
easy.
because I think I'm pretty sure that for most people, if they're using Windows, the firewall is probably on by default.
Yeah.
Um, but not necessarily for you with a Mac. I'm not sure if it's on by default. I have so many Macs, I've gone through things. I'm not sure of exactly the default setting. I hope it's on by default for a Mac, but I'm not sure. Um, and in either case, I think it's worth checking to make sure that it's on and working, because it's not right. It's not like this big complicated job. You don't have to download, install anything. You're just using the one built in to Mac or Windows, and just making
Okay.
sure that it's turned on and you don't have a bunch of exceptions to it, that you're letting things in. So
Sweet.
it's definitely not super hard. This is, I think,
Okay.
doable for anybody listening to us.
Excellent. Excellent.
Yep. And so you already extended our call to action, Nick, there, by the way.
Did I? I
So,
stole your thunder. You've done
oh,
that to me a time or two.
yeah. Oh, no.
You
I mean, you know, we might have to think about the call to action, because by the time we get there, you know, sometimes it's a little bit of a surprise, but mostly we're both just kind of, we know what it is. Even hopefully the listeners well prepared most of the time, and you know, so I mean, it's kind of a good recap just to summarize. You know, we're making sure the firewall's turned on for each of the computers in your home, especially laptops. But yeah,
there we go. That's an easy enough call to action. And if you have questions, we're going to throw it in the show notes. So
yep.
check those out. Awesome. That's a great call to action. Do I get to continue on with our next episode?
Oh yeah, get them excited. You're good at pumping up them.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I read this and I was like, okay, let's go. Like, I was excited for this. In the next episode, you're going to learn about using a guest network as a layer of protection for your devices in your home, which I thought was kind of cool. I was like, wait a second, that sounds like it could be a lot, but really we're going to keep it super simple, and we're going to find a way to where we could talk about what a guest network can and can't protect you from. It is so vital, and I said this before, but it's so vital to know and understand the risks we're exposed to. So, you know, the fact that we're going to go highlight what areas you have that add protection, it's going to be a great episode. So I'm pretty pumped. I'm pretty pumped. Like, here we go. Using a guest network as a layer of protection. Woo!
Yep.
Awesome. Well, that was a good show, man.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Are you ready to take action and wondering where to start? Get my Bulletproof My Identity Starter Kit for free. The 7 most vital layers of protection everyone needs. I'll send you one step at a time and help you if you get stuck. Just go to bulletproofmyid.com and enter your name and email, and I will send you the first step. Again, that's bulletproofmyid.com.